I don't know if I should be frank with y'all, but how? Good morning, y'all. Because I've been drinking my water, and life is what you trying to make it. Life is what you got to do for it. Your life is your life. Ain't nothing too hard. Ain't nothing gonna stop you from the love of God. All you gotta do is just organize and stay committed to your situation. So anyway, I was reading about the two Bibles. I got two books I got here: the two Babylons and Sabbath in the New Testament. Okay, so one talks about what it looks like when you have two Babylons, was pagan and was non-pagan, was pagan and was Roman, and was from Christ and was from not Christ, and the beliefs. You gotta know the difference. And then you got the Sabbath in the New Testament answers to questions. I'm on page 28 right now. I took a break because I'm reading something about, I'm on chapter 2. So, I've just finished reading chapter 1. Chapter 1, this is a good book, you guys, because it talks about Sabbatarians, it talks about what we organize, how we stay organized, and how we stay committed to our tasks and commitments. And I realize I'm the last generation of Adventists in my situation, but because one day it's gonna be a break for 1,000 years, and ain't gonna be no life down here. We all gonna be in heaven and glory. So, and that's what we got to talk about, discuss about, because my dad said, all those days they've been doing these things for life. Well, I didn't even see nothing. People was partying and getting back since the beginning of time, had kids and everything. But now here we are. We have to come to a pause because Gen Z is here. Gen Z is the last generation to have babies. That's from 1997 to this time. I don't think anybody else is gonna have kids. If they do, it's going to be till about 215 years. But we getting smaller and smaller. We reduction. We degenerated. We've got shorter, and we've lost a lot of energy. I had my energy all the way up till I was about 29 or 28. I couldn't walk anymore after about that age because people been walking for generations. You have people who living in their hundreds and 900s. People who have babies and thousands of babies. It's a lot of people in this world. They said, I believe it's 500,000 people only right now. And over time, people had deceased. It was like in the millions and billions. But that don't mean Adam and Eve didn't know that. They knew that because, when it was just them and they had everything and the Spirit of God was roaming everywhere, it ain't just about that because, it happened before I did. Those people were really strong. So I came through what I came through because my parents were, they believed and stuff, they were strong people. So, if it's because of that, it's because it was organized the way it was. You can't just do things and not know what you're doing. People have to do what they have to do, even if they're small or young, and they bring you in because of their love. And, like you talking about angels and stuff, and who they think like it's really weird and saying, but they call them fairies and whatnot, so kids won't be scared and all that. But it's really that's that simple. That's light. It's light and everything. You see the signs. You see them in your dreams and stuff. I be seeing fairies in dreams and stuff, or angels in my dreams, or like the light things and stuff. You have to know when you have to pause and whatnot. I had a dream about it once. You ever dream something, I read a book about dreams, and it tells you about your dreams and stuff. And so, like, if you get signs in your dreams, or you see images in your dreams, it's because that's what you saw when you was back then and there, along these years ago. I've been walking around many places, and I've been doing what I had to do. But other than that, when I have to walk, it's because of my memory. I gotta remember, this is what I do. I go walking and bicycling. You gotta get natural to it and adapt to your environment, because there's schools and everything, and people do what they gotta do. And the world is really a vast, big place, so you just gonna have to deal with it. Even if there were other worlds and whatnot, that don't mean you gotta do certain things that you don't want to do. Those stars and everything up there, those things are up there for a reason. Galaxies and mid light years away. You gotta think about those things. You gotta think about oceans and mountains and stuff, and animals, and all those things that carry what Creator made. We going to church, and you gotta think about these things. And it's about to be 6 a.m. in the morning. I woke up around 3. A lot of people have been waking up at 3. And another thing about waking up at 3, that's a sign from God. If you're waking up earlier, it's because God, He wants to get your attention. Your Creator, He wants to say, hey, it's a Sabbath, don't be doing things that you're not supposed to be doing. Other than that, but it's because, we live in another side of the world, and some people just wake up earlier than others. And I'm drinking my water. I took my shower this morning. I drank my water, and I took my shower this morning. I was listening to my music. I was listening to a CD with some choir people on it. These things don't just come out of nowhere. Some people had to. It's a new beginning. Everything that my life began with me. My own life. Everybody has their own account of their things that they have. And my dad, he been married for years. He's married. He got kids. He got children. and he married. Either adopted or non-adopted, we all come from Adam and Eve. We gotta take care of one another. We gotta listen to one another, because there are things in this world that we don't see. Don't lean on your understanding, and always agree with your adversary. Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't cover what other people's have, but you can also love your neighbor, and pray for those who persecute you, meaning people who bully and all that. And because God's blessing them too, He shines the light on all of them too. He don't ever give up. He's strong. God has to do what He has to do, because of how He made the world, and God is just a good God. He's fair. He knows what to do. He knows how to survive. He knows how to get things, and He's really humble. He's really long suffering. That come from being humble, and God taught us how to love. God taught us how to have joy, and take care of our peace, and make sure we're kind to one another, which comes from courtesy, which comes from being kind, and because I came from a queen, and because she was taught how to be kind, because at one time she wasn't always kind. At one point she was mean. Same thing with a man, because he was mean too. But they had to learn how to be kind to one another. Just like when you want something from somebody and you don't have it, and you wanna be kind. You wanna love people. You wanna be grateful for what you have. You want to do something that you wouldn't want to do. You want to be fair with someone. How things came about to be, and what this is some of the things that only one person knows how to do, and that's God the Father. My dad, I treat him like a pharaoh, because I know him for what he is, and my cousin Kel, and my brother, they all the same way. And my dad, he probably was treated that way when he was much younger, but I wouldn't know it, because my dad, he had a lot of hair when he was young. He was like a Moses, or it might have been Ramses, I don't know. But you got that situation, or his brother, each time for his proliferation. You would never know, because it's passed down from generation to generation. Those men were strong. They were giants. They were big. They had a lot of kids, and they were able to do what they had to do. They were able to teach and guard towns that they live in. They lived the way they lived, black men. I mean, real black men. They were like warriors, chiefs. Warriors come from other areas, and you have chiefs, and you have the women who take care of the baskets and the bread and the food, and the children. They nurture, and they teach their kids about the land, about where we come from. They always run the same session. It's like a school, because that's what it was, and they have to do all that to help us get where we are today, because that's what those children were taught with their parents and grandparents. And even if there's a willow tree, you talking about Eve and all of them. She was talking to a tree, sitting by a tree, and just thinking of Grandma Willow, because these trees came from somewhere. They weren't always here, They grow up, they go and be what they have to be. There's a story behind all these things, or why all these things are here the way they are. And you see trees, and you see things, and you think they're always here, Or they talk about the evolutionists, and they talk about the people who how things evolved and changed over time, and lights and fire. They would go through the fire with you, They would do anything for you because they love you. And, you gotta realize that, You gotta be thankful for what you have. But look how far we've come. Now we're going into the future. We're going high into the sky. We got places to go. We got things to do. Have to think of the future. And that's why I have to think of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, because Gen Alpha, they gonna be the ones that stand out. They gonna stand out. Those the generation that stand out. They gonna have to start all over again, and that's the 215 years. And then we got the Zoomer generation after the millennial generation, because I'm millennial, and my brother, he's millennial, and we got people in the Gen Z era. They gotta do whatever because they see everything. They zoom in on everything. They go in and see things. It's a different world altogether. We could be holding a planet in, or some cells, because everything has a connector. And I always talk about those things being one of those things and everything. So we have to really realize that that's what it is. We can't be acting funky. We have to be doing the right thing, and that's just one of the things why we have to do certain things. I'm sorry, y'all. 1 second. As I was saying, hi you guys. I've been trying to talk about something that this book talks about the true origin of the mother and child, mass warfare, the weaker, the purgatory, the sovereign, pontiff press for the dead. the rosary, the sign of the cross, the confessional, clothing and crowning of images, priests, monks, and nuns, relic worship of the Sacred Heart, extreme unction, plus much more. This is a Babylonian goddess and mother and son. Catholicism adopted the image and just changed the names. See, that thing is by changing the names and changing the times, because you need to realize the truth, It's horrifying. They only change it because history repeats itself, So they have to make something new. But how do you do that when really the same truth of the matter? Jesus Christ, he came from something from a long time ago. He's the Son of God, right? So, and we worship our God, our Creator. But God is spirit. How can we know these things when we don't see it? What about the things that are unseen to an unknown future? So we have to prepare ourselves. So this book as well. This is the author of this book. This book is called The Sabbath in the New Testament. Answers to questions, and his name is Samuel Bakioki, and I'm in chapter 2 of this book. The first chapter it talks about the Sabbath. It shows the preface and everything, but the 3 views on the Sabbath in the New Testament. This book it's really full in depth. It talks about the origin of the view of the abrogation, because you got to see, recent redefinition, Reformation elaboration. It talks about all those things. It talks about people like Aquinas. It talks about Calvin. It talks of these people, what they were talking about, what they wanted. The Presbyterians, the Congregationalists, the Methodists and Baptists. People of the time of Ellen G. White. You got people in the 17th century who were Sabbatarians. So now that I'm in chapter 2, I just want to conclude this video as, if you're thinking of something that you love to do, you will continue doing it. And plus, it's because it means something and there's a good benefit. You have to start somewhere, okay? And that's the only way things work the way they need to work, so it can all come back to you. You get the blessing, the fruits of your blessing. But their fruits you should know their labor. And that's why they always say that in the Bible. And now that I know this and read this and stuff, it's good. They have pictures in here, like they have this picture here, a drawing here, so you can look at these things and see why these things matter. There's a difference because there are 2 Babylons, okay? The 2 Babylons, one was Samaria and the other was Rome, okay? So now that we know that, that's what that's about. The 2 Samarians. What were the 2 Babylonians' names? Not Samarians, 2 Babylonians' names. There were 2 Babylons, right? Okay, so the 2 Babylons, the Babylon the Great and the mother of harlots, because that's like what it means and all right there, okay? Because it's like babies, they're babies. There's a lot of children. There's a lot of people. That's what they were talking about. They're talking about all these kids and people down here. That's what it looked like back in those days. And, it was like a drawing. They did what they had to do. You wouldn't understand it unless you were in that position yourself. So they're talking about what they had to do, what they stood out to be, how they came out to be. Because, you're talking about the Son of God here. You're talking about someone who did what he could long ago. What's the big deal if you don't know what the meaning of it is? There's a mother and her child, and she has to teach her children everything. His child did everything. He was brought down. God sent his son, and he did what he had. He had to build. He had to take care of what he had to take care of. It started somewhere. Someone had to plant. God made God. He was gardening. He always checks in his carpentry. He made the house a house of prayer, a place to rest and because it's a place to rest. You don't bring people and mess up the house with animals and whatnot, turn it into a marketplace. You don't need to do that. I turn my place into like a library, like where I could read and recline and sit down and do what I got to do. Oh, and since it's time, we almost know that, just recognize where you come from. Because if you do that and respect the Sabbath, don't do non-secular and mix secular together. On the Sabbath day, because it's about to be Sabbath morning, it's still kind of nighttime. It's 3 hours later because I told you that already. Now, so now that we understand that, the thing is we have to rest. We have to listen to our bodies. We don't want to get arrested for resting. We have to listen to our bodies and listen to and admire God's handiwork and see what clues are, because you have to pay attention. It's about seeing. It's about staying at watch and pray, and most importantly, because you have to listen to what's going on. My parents already know that because they were raised the way they were. It's traditional, because it all comes back to how we are. It comes from the top, from top to bottom, from bottom to top. You got to go all the way in, from left to right, from top to bottom, but left to right. Okay, and because it's like top to bottom and left to right. That's my right. But then you have to think about your own individual self, because it's only by faith that you find things that you work for. And so when you do that, and you understand that what you are about, you believe in your name and who you are, and not everybody has to know everything about you. Some things are personal, But now that I know what I am, and I realize how special I am and what is meant to be, God, he said, God, how much God would do for us if we trust in him, because we're humans, we're flesh and blood, we're all one. We come together. This is the Sabbath. All right, guys, bye.